As of January 1st, 2023, the following things will go into effect, and people need to be aware of this. It abolishes cash bail for almost every offense. This includes, but isn't limited to, kidnapping, armed robbery, second-degree murder, drug-induced homicide, aggravated DUI, threatening a public official, and aggravated fleeing and eluding. Offenders released on electronic monitoring have to be in violation for 48 hours before law enforcement can act. They could almost drive to Alaska before we can even look for them. It denies victims their constitutional rights. And keep this in mind, businesses and homeowners. Officers will no longer be able to remove trespassers from your residence or your businesses. Someone could decide to live in your shed, and all we can do is give them a ticket. You have to decide what level of force is required to remove them, and whether or not it's legal. This is a massive threat to the residents of Orland Park, Cook County, and Illinois.
Hey, shalom, shalom. It's the brother Yahawah coming back in the spirit, giving all praises to Yahawah, Bahasham, Yahawashi, and a mighty shalom to the hopeful elect. So I'm not sure if y'all brothers seen that video at the beginning. That's actually a video I started to see circulate among certain brothers who have some knowledge, some wisdom, some understanding. And also that was something that was being discussed by, some coworkers that I know at work. I was hearing, a conversation they were having where they're basically saying how Illinois state legislation had basically passed the act called the Safety Act. Now I'm gonna pull up this article real quick. I'm not sure if y'all brothers are familiar with it. It's called the Safety Act, and it's based around criminal justice reform, based around law enforcement reform in regards to many different things about how to quote unquote reform police. Because there's a huge agenda that's being, spewed across all the United States in reference to, are police too brutal? Are they targeting, minorities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? You brothers understand Black Lives Matters, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, essentially all these different instances where a so-called black man was at the center of what was going on. And we understand about police brutality, but ultimately out of all the issues that we have, that is not the top priority. And shout out to Chronicles of Judah, because he's the first person I had heard on a higher level actually break down what the military industrial complex, and in particular the crime industry of America, is really about. It's all about monetary value. I'm not sure if any of you brothers, Lord forbid, y'all haven't, gotten into the slammer, and y'all brothers haven't had any type of infractions or, crimes against you, or you had to sit in a jail cell. But unfortunately in our community, that's something that's very, very prevalent with us. Not necessarily because, we commit the most crimes, but when it comes to a lot of the crimes in this system, in particular, so-called black men are the main ones getting booked, are the main ones getting indicted on it, and are the quote unquote face or the figurehead of many heinous crimes. When you listen to rap music, when you watch movies, it's always centered around a so-called black man and Hispanic man as well, committing many different crimes that eventually result in them being behind bars. And one of the key aspects of that is quote unquote bail. Now, for those of y'all who aren't familiar with bail, and I'm no lawyer, I'm gonna have to hit up a brother who training to be a lawyer. I'm no lawyer, but if y'all brothers do some basic research on it, essentially what bail is if you have an act that a quote unquote police officer or sheriff will book you in, let's say, burglary, right? When you're essentially detained and you set a date to be in front of, a jury or whatever, a judge will essentially give you a bail amount that you have to pay for your crime, because every crime has a monetary value associated with it. So let's say, example, if somebody or Lord forbid, you're in a position where you committed a burglary, right? And they set a $50,000 bail. That's what you have to pay in order to be freed from that cell, right? But obviously, how many Jakes do y'all know have $50,000 to free themselves from jail? Unless you come from a rich family, more than likely you don't got nowhere near that. And even let's say the crime was $10,000. How many of y'all brothers know somebody who got $10,000 cash in hand who can just pull that out of his ass? So what normally happens is that if you can't make bail, you would go to a bail bondsman. And I'm keeping it real with you. I Googled the vast majority of this information before I did this video. Y'all brothers can easily Google this stuff up and get a basic understanding on the system. It's good to be informed on these things. So essentially, if you can't make bail, you pay with a bail bondsman. He'll free you out of jail. You'll be the surety. He'll pay for your bond. And essentially, you have to either pay that back if you're not guilty, or it goes to him if you're not guilty. It's a specific system where you pay somebody to essentially free you out of jail without you having to pay the full amount. It's normally anywhere from 10%, might be 15%, but essentially you don't have to pay the full amount for bail, for your bail, but you do have to appear in court and go through the whole process, etc., etc. Now, a lot of these crimes can be kidnapping. It can be homicide, second-degree murder, and ultimately based off of your past and, if you are an offender, you committed multiple offenses, a judge can put you up to a very high bail. And the vast majority of jakes ain't got money like that. So a lot of times what ends up happening is that you're stuck in the system for months, who knows how long. Sometimes before you get a date, it could be years on end, especially with COVID going on. You understand that the justice system has been delayed. It's been very, very delayed. So essentially what happens is a lot of jakes may have a crime that they can't pay for, or they may be in a situation where they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And y'all understand how this justice system is. If you are a so-called young black man, if you're a so-called young brown man, they're not going to have any mercy on you. And a lot of times what happens with the system being a monetary system is you may not have a specific crime that demanded that type of bond or that type of bail amount, but essentially you're in the land of your captivity and you ultimately got to pay a $20,000-$30,000 bond, and there's no way that you can pay it because, to be quite honest, we at the bottom. So you understand how the system is run. It ultimately puts us at a disadvantage, especially those of us who don't have any monetary understanding, who have no type of legal understanding on how the system works, and who don't know how to maneuver. So in comes the quote-unquote Safety Act. So I want to read it real quick. These are different perspectives. A lot of these are Republican perspectives. Some of these are quote-unquote liberal perspectives. So y'all brothers got to listen to it with an open mind. And also one thing y'all brothers got to understand, when you see these little videos at the beginning, don't always take what it says to heart. I've seen a lot of brothers talking about on December 13th, Biden is going to abolish all cash and go to electrical dollar. I'm going to keep it real with you, bro. I looked into that act. I actually looked up the physical act, and I didn't see anything like that. Not saying that it won't happen, but ultimately, I'm not going to get overzealous to think on December 13th, those things are going to happen. And as you brothers start to gain more knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, you start to slow down. You start to realize that you should do this. This is Sirach 11:7. It says, blame not before you have examined the truth. Understand first and then rebuke. And going on to the next verse, it says, answer not before you have heard the cause, neither interrupt men in the midst of their talk. And one thing that goes on with a lot of jakes, especially brothers who got platforms and they want to be the nigga who announced what was going on through the video, is they'll get hella emotional. And I've been guilty of doing this before. I don't know any brother who's made a video who hasn't done this. But what will happen before they do their research and understand what they're talking about, they make a video because they saw somebody else do it. And a lot of times they'll have scare tactics, fear mongering, to ultimately get people to watch and follow them because they're quote unquote giving you the news or the inside scoop on something. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the things that we speak about on these videos, especially if you have a platform talking about things related to the Bible and what's going on around you, is ultimately you're here to warn other people and to give people knowledge, wisdom, and understanding on what they should know and what's going on around them. As the scripture says, let us not be ignorant of Satan's devices. Well, a lot of times you got to do research, you got to, background check things, and you have to study things on your own, because a lot of times a man can say false information and you basing your life off of what another man told you, and you put in a bad position because you didn't research. So getting into this, I highly recommend y'all brothers do some, research on it, because the way people have been trying to spin this is they might try to make it seem like it's a whole liberal thing. Oh, liberals are trying to do this, or the Republicans don't want, a fair system. So I'm trying my best to break this down and give y'all my opinion on it, a fair assessment on it. But all y'all brothers do y'all research. So ultimately, getting into this video, it says, this article, it says when a new Illinois law takes effect next year, it will do away with the cash bail system in the state, meaning suspects charged with felonies, including second-degree murder, aggravated battery, and arson will be released without bail. And I try to actually pull up the specific bill of the it's a 600 page act, so you know I ain't finna go through no 600 pages. I try to pull the specific page that had this reform in it, but I couldn't find it. So we kind of just going at face value with what these articles say. So long story short is saying they're gonna do it with the cash bail system, so that way, you know, certain suspects who commit, you know, second-degree murder, aggravated battery will be released without bail, meaning that they don't have to put up the bail amount, which may be $30, $50, $25,000 to free themselves from jail, right? So continuing on, it says the counter signal reports the Safety, Accountability, Fairness, Equity Today Act, also called SAFE-T Act, will end cash bail and includes 12 non-detainable offenses: second-degree murder, aggravated battery, arson without bail, as well as drug-induced homicide, kidnapping, burglary, robbery, intimidation, aggravated DUI, aggravated fleeing and eluding, drug offenses, and threatening a public official. When the law takes effect on January 1st, 2023, criminals charged with the crimes mentioned above will be released without bail. So ultimately, when you read this, there's a lot of very serious offenses that will, quote unquote, allow these criminals to be free. Now, what is really telling you is that they don't have to wait in a jail cell until they get a court date with the judge, right? So like, let's say example, a brother commits a burglary. I don't know how long the time is before you see a judge. It really just depends. But some brothers be in there for 6 months. They may be in there for a year until they see a judge, or they may not know how the system works. So they're in there waiting, trying to see the judge to see what their sentence is going to be. Whereas if they could just, you know, come up with the bail, they could be freed immediately. And ultimately, brothers, y'all got to understand, sometimes when brothers go to prison or go to county jail, a lot of times it's them at the wrong place at the wrong time, because you understand in this society, as a so-called black man, you're guilty until proven innocent. I don't care what walk of life you in, how much money you got, how much clout you got. If an officer want to put you in for some shit, he will put you in. Just like with ASAP Rocky, I think he was in Switzerland or Norway or Sweden or something, and ultimately he did something. He was in the slammer for what, 21 days, 28 days. The only reason he got out is because he's first and foremost famous, and he ultimately had Trump give him a pardon. But you and me, you think the president of the United States finna let us out? So you have to understand the condition of the battle that you're in, which is why us so-called black men, you brothers got to be able to understand, you know, the environment you're in, and move with wisdom, knowledge, and discernment, and think things through, because you're ultimately behind enemy lines. But getting back into this, right? So essentially, what they're going to do is get rid of, you know, the cash bail. So let's continue to read down. It says the bail system will be replaced by a system that considers the offense severity, the risk of not appearing in court, and the potential threat to the community if a person is released. When signaling the legislation, Governor J.B. Pritzker remarked, the measure marks a substantial step towards dismantling the systematic racism and that plagues our community, our states, our nation, and brings us closer to true safety, true fairness, and true justice. Supporters of the measure says it's a step in making the justice system equal and fair, especially in minority communities. House Chair of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus, Representative Cam Buckner, told Capital News Illinois that the SAFE-T Act was the first stab at addressing public safety issues and police distrust in minority communities. The 800-page law also addresses detainee rights, police certification, standard use of force, and body cameras. But it's the ending of the cash bail system that gets the most attention. So I just want to stop right there. So this is obviously a liberal supported law. Y'all understand Illinois, New York, California, places like that are essentially, you know, a lot of the grounds where a lot of this progressive reforms, like, you know, banning all electric cars by 2035, or banning all gas and diesel powered cars by 2035, having gun right laws controlled to the point where you have to bring 4 references and all this shit. And now in Illinois, they're doing their criminal justice system reformation, you see that a lot of the heavily democratic, high populated areas are starting to push forward towards what they want the country to move towards, right? So when you brothers look at this from a grand scale, you obviously understand something, because me and you both understand that we don't trust our enemy. Let's actually go to the book of Sirach. It says, Sirach chapter 12 verse 10, it says, never trust your enemy, for like as iron rusted, so is his wickedness. So I want to read that, right? Because ultimately we understand Esau doesn't give a damn about the so-called black man. Esau doesn't care about minorities. He don't care about blacks. He don't care about Hispanics. And ultimately we understand that the system is run off of what? The prison industrial complex, getting minorities who are disadvantaged to essentially work their military industrial complex and giving them cheap goods by having them work in a system for 20 to 30 years of cheap labor. So when you see something like this, where they're trying to quote unquote reform the prison system, it can mean one of two things. It could mean that the Edomites, they finally love us and they want to give us a fair judgment, or they have a higher agenda. And just in my opinion, when you look at a lot of these articles, you see red versus blue, Republican, Democrat, and essentially just like Captain America's Civil War, they're essentially getting the nation to go towards civil war, because that's one of the main ways that they're going to allow this empire, United States, to dissolve from the inside. So when you see things like this is a telltale sign, because you have one side saying that we're going to reform the community, when ultimately, how can you reform the community and allow blacks to get fair treatment? And because ultimately all these damn judges are corrupt. It's actually in the scripture. Let's go to the book of Leviticus, and we'll go to chapter 19. But it speaks on having fair judgment if you're a judge, right? This is Leviticus chapter 19, I'll read verse 15. It says, you shall not do unrighteousness in judgment. You shall not respect the persons of the poor, nor honor the person of the mighty, but in righteousness shall you judge thy neighbor. And we obviously understand that if we're in a monetary system, if a lot of these judges, a lot of these officers have quotas that they have to fill up, and they have a reputation to uphold, and many big lobbyist companies that essentially appoint a lot of these judges to make sure that they're filling their system, like Kanye said in Power, the system broken, the schools closed, the prisons open. If they have the prisons open and they're trying to feed this system, why in their right mind would they judge you off of not being a respecter of persons? They're not like the Most High. They don't have equal and fair judgment. And when the system is corrupted, they're going to go towards those who have money, those who have power, those who have status. And those people at the bottom, they're always going to be wrongly in prison more often than not. Not saying that doesn't happen 100% of the time. That doesn't happen all the time. But me and you both know and understand that the Israelites, according to the Bible, are the main ones who have unfair judgment. Let's also go to the book of Deuteronomy. We'll go to chapter 16, and we'll go down to verse 19. It says, I'll read verse 18. It says, judges and officers shall you make thee in all thy gates, which Yahawah thy God giveth thee throughout thy tribes, and they shall judge the people with just judgment. You shall not wrest judgment. You shall not respect persons, neither take a gift, for a gift does blind the eyes of the wise and pervert the words of the righteous. So ultimately, we would have judges and officers who gave equal judgment to the people, and they were of our tribe. So when we're in a nation where there's an oppressor who's swift like a leopard and as ruthless as a bear, as ruthless as a lion, again, I don't care how innocent you may look to them, you're just a number. A lot of these judges, in your mind, they're just a number. So in their mind, you're just a number. So they're not going to give you fair judgment. And a lot of these people behind the scenes take gifts. Because how is it that Gucci Mane can have all these illegal weapons not registered? Lil Wayne can have all these illegal weapons not registered, and they get 2 years or they get 4 years? Because money speaks, man. The love of money is the root of all evil. Because if you doing unrighteous judgment, you sinning. But you do it for what? The love of money. So if you somebody who doesn't have money, you're obviously not going to get the same judgment compared to somebody else who has money. Or if you have darker skin, if you a Jake, if you a so-called black, so-called Hispanic man, and they're not feeling good towards you in that moment, or you may have a troubled past, you're trying to reform, but you're at the wrong place, right time, they're not going to be as lenient and judge based off of your heart, but they're going to judge based off of their emotion. They're going to judge based off of the type of lawyer you got. You may have a shitty lawyer, somebody else, a prosecutor, he got all the understanding, and you in a shitty position. It's not fair. So that's why the system is broken. But that's not the point of this video. Because when you understand that the system is broken, you have to ask yourself, why are they reforming it? And ultimately, it's because they want to promote a lot of fear. They want to have a lot of the people who are conservative realize that the system is failing them, and they need to take, matters into their own hands, get guns, get weapons. And the left thinks that they're doing things free, helping these things. But the people on the right think that that's what's causing the country to be destroyed, thus causing civil war, right? So I want to read what the right says, right? It says, supporters of the law say the cash bail system is not fair for poor defendants, but a rising chorus of law enforcement officials and prosecutors across the Prairie State are sounding the alarm. Will County State Attorney James Glasgow said in a YouTube video, it will be the end of days once the law kicks in. He says the hands of police, prosecutors, and judges will be tied. What you see in Chicago will have here. Glasgow said he wouldn't be able to hold people longer than 3 months if they demand trial. On the 90th day, they get out no matter what crime they committed, the state attorney said. And I don't know how true that is. Again, that's why you brothers want to, do these things and look it up for yourself, because ultimately, if the bill is not in front of you, you're not going to 100% understand what it says. And even if the bill is in front of you, you may not understand the verbiage and what it entails, because, they put all these crazy big ass words that the average American can't understand. So you have to understand that the bailing is in reference to things that aren't capital crimes like murder, rape, murdering somebody while kidnapping them. Those are capital crimes which you can't even put a bail to. You can't even set a bail for. But there are other crimes, like they said, burglary, robbery, second-degree murder, where you can set a bail. So according to Illinois, they're not going to set a bail, but they're going to judge things based off of certain pieces of evidence, whether or not that person is a public endangerment to a specific person for a crime. There's many different things that ultimately aren't going to be standard or general, but they're going to be more subjective. So we don't know how this new system is going to work and whether or not it's going to bring quote unquote fair justice, which we know it's not, but it's more so going to allow a lot of criminals to be freed, which is what a lot of these Republicans, a lot of these conservatives, a lot of these Edomites are basically speaking of. So it says, he called on voters to demand anyone running for the election in November to repeal the measure. The bill will destroy the city and the state of Illinois. I don't even understand how the people who support it can't realize it. And I'm going to just go down and just see if they're talking about it. This is it right here. It says, those who support the new law say the current system imposes a different justice system on defendants who can afford their bond compared to those who cannot. While we agree that a person's freedom should not depend on their bank account, completely eliminating the current system was never the answer. Abolishing cash bail means that every person that is being held in jail awaiting a trial will have their bonds exonerated and community safety will be put at risk. So a lot of times the reason why they'll put a high cash bail for somebody who committed second-degree murder is because they're at a higher risk than the average individual. So if they put a bail bond at $50,000, even if you have a bondsman, you don't got $50,000. You don't got $5,000 in your bank account, and you more than likely don't know somebody who has that type of money to spot you. But also for the individual who's wrongly in prison, who's just trying to make it, and he made a small mistake, if they send a $25,000 bail, how you gonna pay that? So essentially, you're gonna be punished for it just like everybody else. And it's all based off of fair judgment, which isn't a thing in America, right? So it says, abolishing cash bail means that every person being held in jail awaiting trial will have their bonds exonerated and community safety will be put at risk. The 3 Brown County officials noted the new law is full of contradictions, ambiguous, and is very poorly drafted. Lawyers across the state are scratching their heads, wondering how this new system is going to work and keep people safe. Additionally, beginning January 1st, 2023, judges will no longer be allowed to consider the person's threat to the community. Serial domestic abusers, sex offenders, residential burglars will be set free without judges being allowed to consider public safety generally unless the prosecution can prove by clear and convincing evidence that the accused poses a real and present threat to a specific person in no condition to mitigate the threat. So I was watching a video, and y'all brothers can look this up. Y'all can Google Safety Act Illinois, and I think it's the 4th video down, has about 400 views on a Fox network in Illinois. They're basically going back and forth about what this bill entails. And basically what somebody said is that a judge could set a quote unquote can have somebody stay in jail and wait for their court hearing if they present a public safety risk. Like example, if somebody kidnapped somebody in particular but didn't kill that person, then the judge could say, well, that person who you kidnapped but didn't kill is at risk of you doing something, so I have to keep you in jail for that person's safety. Now, let's say, example, somebody is distributing narcotics, distributing crack, or you might be related to a gang. There may not be anybody in particular who they're going to use to, quote unquote, protect the community by giving that person a specific name, but it's a general thing as far as the community. So if you're a registered sex offender and they can't find the person who you're registered against, or let's say you committed homicide, right? Or second degree murder, which is murder without premeditation. Like you got angry and you just beat and killed a nigga, right? Well, essentially, if they don't have somebody specifically that they can use to propose as a real and present threat, if they don't have a bail bond because of that, they can release that person after a certain period of time without them having to pay bail or pay for a bail bondsman. So you can see that, yeah, in theory, the Democrats think that it'll help protect discrimination against minority groups. But ultimately, and just in my opinion, this is a way for them to allow the dregs of the society to be released. And this also may be a launching pad or a launching ground zero for what the Democrats ultimately want to establish across the country, where they release a lot of criminals. And it sounds like that video at the beginning, purge. But again, I'm not going to come to a full conclusion. I'm not a lawyer. Y'all brothers do your own research. But just based off of it, I definitely see how this can spiral out of control, which is why a lot of the quote-unquote Republicans and the conservatives don't like this bill. And ultimately, it's going to lead to a lot of chaos. It's going to lead to a lot of destruction. And I'll read this. It says, simply eliminating cash bail at the outset without first implementing meaningful reforms and dedicating adequate resources to allow evidence-based risk assessment and supervision would be premature. And ultimately, I think it said, I don't know if it's this right here or if it's another article. It says that Illinois is the first state that is basically going to do away with cash bail. So this is a new reform that's never been seen before. So, brothers, we don't know how it's going to work out. But, you brothers be aware and understand what's coming down the pipeline. Protect yourself. Really understand that the society that we're going to live, that we're going to move to, is going to be a lot more crime. People are going to stop listening to their officials. Just like as it was stated in Ecclesiastes, because they ultimately want to set a preset for, more military reforms, NATO soldiers, potentially UN soldiers, FEMA officials, and ultimately they want to lock down this country and they want to bring down great wrath, as they're doing with a lot of other reforms as we speak. So Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I give all praises to Yahawah, Bahasham, Yahawashi. Until next time, Mr. Brother Ash Abba signing out.